Great. Hi, everyone. Glad you were able to be here. I'm Zoe. I am one of the two chapter leaders at OWASP NYC, along with Guy Osa. And I'm glad to introduce our speaker, global board member of OWASP and president of InfoSec Girls, Vandana Verma, who's going to present on building an AppSec program using open source projects.
Thank you so much, Zoe. And thanks everyone for joining today. Let me straight get into the topic. So today we are going to talk about building an AppSec program with open source projects. And we've all seen that there are so many commercial tools out there, even open source tools out there, but people are not aware that how they can be used, how people can leverage it. Even my career over the past few years, I have realized that there are so many wonderful open source projects that we could leverage as a baseline and then go ahead and buy the commercial tools or projects and then think about what exactly is needed in our organization. So today we are going to talk about this. So this is the AppSec framework, which in general I'm sure you would have seen, and everywhere people talk about this framework itself, wherein it starts with requirements gathering, threat modeling, source code review. Then people added software composition analysis, vulnerability testing, defect tracking, defensive controls, all of this. But this is what I feel, that there's no component that should be missed from it, and every component should be known to people who are working on ground on it, especially when we are talking about DevSecOps or DevOps or agile methodology, wherein we want to fail fast. We want to have the technology wherein we monitor it from the start itself. We understand what we have. I have seen organizations who don't understand their own uh, uh, appetite for the tools, for the products they need. At the same time, they have no clue what's running in the organization. They say that we have an inventory, but then the inventory is not up to date. Inventory is not showing them the right kind of softwares that are available in the whole pipeline. So it becomes very tricky. Now, before I start with the requirements gathering, I'll tell you a bit about myself. I am Vandana, and I'm part of OWASP as one of the global board of directors, as well as I'm leading OWASP Bangalore chapter. Alongside, I do a lot of pro bono work wherein I try and educate people around cybersecurity. So I've given a few cybersecurity trainings, free trainings at global AppSec conferences, and a few conferences in India, alongside some schools and colleges, so that people know that yes, cybersecurity is something, application security is something that they can learn and make it as a career. So that's about myself. Now, requirements gathering, to to start with, wherein the client says that I want to gather the requirements, and that's when the hustle starts. The client comes, or the project leader comes, saying that yes, this is what we need to build. That's what happened with us. They came up with certain requirements. We wrote it down on an Excel sheet, and we started working on that. That was fine, but suddenly there were requirements that got changed. Now, when you have a change in the requirement in the middle of a sprint or a cycle, how would you handle it? And suddenly you have no clue that, okay, this was the thing that was supposed to be picked up. Now we have picked up this, and there have been confusions. I've worked on very big projects to small projects, and I've realized that these are some things which are very much important for anyone, for the person who is working on ground as a developer, operation person, or even the security people. And it is equally important for the client, because they want the product which they want to see on the internet or live. So OWASP Security Rat is one project which is a requirements automation tool which can assist the and address all the problems which we were facing, wherein how to gather the requirements, how to automate it. If there is a requirement change, can we add the sprint? Can we maintain the list? Okay, this is where it is. This is when there was a change in the sprint, and now this is the latest version we have to adopt to. So this project actually simplifies the requirements for anyone who's working on the pipeline and automate the whole approach. And it gives you a nice list of requirements that this is what we are supposed to do. At the same time, this is another project which I really like, and this is one project which is like a complete package. So security knowledge framework is a requirement gathering tool or a project. At the same time, it also has so many other projects embedded to it. Now I'm going to talk about what all other projects are there and why I emphasize so much on security knowledge framework. Because think about, you have some product which already has, or you have an Excel sheet. Think just for the sake that you have an Excel sheet which is pre-populated with certain requirements, and you just need to map it to the requirements that you have and remove all other requirements. How would you feel? You will feel, yes, this is what I wanted. So OWASP security knowledge framework is that kind of open source project wherein it has all the pre-populated requirements that can be there based on the maturity level and based on the kind of projects or the organization you have. Like you have a financial based organization, or you have an IT organization, or you have a social media application. So based on that, it can populate that, okay, these can be the requirements. Or as part of the sprint, you feel that yes, should be added as part of a small sprint and only these requirements should go. So it can actually map all of that, and you can track it very well with versioning. Then now we've done the requirements gathering, we have a good view on, okay, this is what is there, and this is what we should follow. Now we have the right kind of requirements. So then comes a point wherein, how do you handle the threats which can be there on an application? Will you wait till the end, or will you start threat modeling your application, understanding that what your application is, who's going to be using the applications, how many users might be coming, or what kind of risk might be there on the application? So threat modeling has become a need which people have started to understand that yes, this is so much required and as early as possible in the whole pipeline. uh, and one important aspect is that when you start understanding these things, then you start automating also. So automation is another aspect which goes hand in hand with threat modeling, and this project OWASP Dragon highlights it really well. It actually creates the threat diagrams or special signals that yes, this is something which was missed, and you should be addressing this concern, or this is something that you should be focusing on more. Because when we talk about threat modeling, these are the things that we need, that we don't understand, like, oh, okay, this is a configuration error that I need to be looking at, or I might have missed out on some security concerns at the database, or I've not covered that portion. So it gives you a holistic picture. Okay, these are the things that I should be covering. And it can also give you a recommendation, okay, this is how it can be mitigated. At the same time, this is another amazing project, which is a Pythonic framework, or Pythium, OWASP Pythium. This also gives beautiful data flow diagrams, and it gives you the best part is that it gives you a kind of sequence diagram for the cloud services. I think somebody is on unmute. I can hear the typing sound. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Hello? Okay. Then comes the point wherein we have mapped the threats. We have covered everything in cloud or even in on-premise mode. We've done the threat modeling for our application. Then comes you're writing the code. And when you're writing the code and you don't do the secure code review, what how much harm can be there? That you will see all the vulnerabilities that could be there in an application on the production side. This has happened wherein uh, the secure code review was not done because of, I would say, 10-15 years back it was not that prevalent. Now people are understanding that every piece which is part of the DevOps lifecycle, has to have security, and we are talking about shift left strategy. But that time it was not there. So what people were doing, they were doing the application security testing, and the functional testing or QA testing alongside security testing used to be there. Then the site goes live, and boom, there are vulnerabilities. How would you handle? And for some of them, there was one thing that I realized, that we approved a certain environment, and when the application went live, there was another environment that went live, and we told that these are the vulnerabilities that needs to be fixed, that were fixed, and then still we saw those vulnerabilities on the production. So they realized that now we have to go back and start fixing. And as per the research, remember that the cost for fixing the bug in production is, I would say, 10 times, 100 times more than what we can do if we can reduce if we fix that early. Let's say if we start fixing in the code itself, we can actually save the cost rather than tracking back and figuring out who did what and doing all the blame game. And then at the end, okay, let's fix it. But then you need people, you need bandwidth, you need so many resources, and you'll need everyone working together. It'll be on fire that yes, this needs to be fixed. So secure code review can actually address some challenges. And how better would it be if you have some kind of a checklist? Not everyone is so good at secure code review, not everyone is a coder. I started my career as a developer, but then realized that, okay, now I'm part of security and I am good in this. So over the years, I actually kind of left that. But when it comes to secure code review, when I was asked to do, it felt like, oh my god, I should have had some checklist which could have helped me in doing the secure code review. So secure code review checklist is something which is really amazing. And it's like I have had discussions about this checklist with so many other leaders and people. Some people say that it needs updation or a lot of editing, but other people say that even though it was last written in 2017, it's still valid. It's still relevant because there are so many things which you do as part of the secure code review, and that helps. Um to give you an example, think about certain parameters which you want to see in the code and you want to figure out, and those things are might not be found by something else. So now you want to do that review, and you want to see that, okay, this checklist has something which can help me, or you can actually build on that, on top of that, like I do it. I use this checklist and build on top of it that, okay, these are the parameters that can be there in the code, these are the input parameters that should be there or which are missed, or these are the evaluation parameter or input validation parameters that should be there, which might be missing. Now another problem comes is that sometimes we don't understand that how much coverage we've done for our testing, whether we have done penetration testing or code review, and how to do that, like how to figure that out is one big problem, like the whole landscape, that what have we covered. So code pulse project is a tool that actually gives you the whole insight on the code coverage. And You can see on the right hand side that it gives you that what are the areas that are left, what are the areas that needs the coverage, and it concentrates on that, and then you can pick it up and start performing the assessment on it. And especially from the penetration testing perspective or the code review perspective, it's one amazing project. And not just that, uh, there's another project which is cheat sheet series. This is something which I would suggest that you should go and check it out. um, Before I started working on this running an AppSec program, I had an assumption that this is just the attack vectors which people look for, or some recommendation. But they have a very specific website which lists down so many amazing technologies and the vulnerabilities where you can see what's the impact, uh, how it can be exploited, how you can mitigate it. All of those things are there. And not just that, about Docker, containers, or Kubernetes, all of those things are also listed as part of the cheat sheet series. You can take amazing inputs from that. And every cheat sheet series is unique in itself because it's been contributed by the community. So people have mentioned so many other references alongside that. Okay, if you're going through these particular checklists, you should also refer to this, which can be really helpful for you. And uh, if you have a specific checklist for a specific code, like when I started working on Go code, it was very tough for me. Like, okay, now another code that I need to start learning. And there are so many languages which are keep coming in. And then I saw this Go Secure Coding Practice Guide, which is specifically designed for Go code, and that can give you a hands-on approach, especially for programmers and security people. It's one amazing checklist. Uh, how can we miss software composition analysis when we're talking about secure code review? We've seen the biggest breaches in the past few years, wherein sometimes we tend to miss out on the components which are part of our code, and we see the exploitation. So software composition analysis speaks just that. Now, I'm sure you will have a question that how to figure out that code. I was reading through one of the research by White Source where they mentioned that 96.8% of the code on the internet is all open source, or the libraries which people have embedded. Like, that's a huge amount of code. At the same time, when if you have a team member who's downloaded something from the internet, or who has got some libraries which were part of the application and they started using it, but then after a couple of months the team got changed and people just forgot, okay, which was used in the code, and we don't have the application library. Now what's next? You would know that, okay, even if one library which is vulnerable, that can be a huge risk for an organization, for an application. So all of these things, how would you address these two wonderful projects? Dependency check and dependency track can help in a wonderful way, wherein if you download dependency check, it can run on your code and figure out, okay, these are the third party libraries, these are the third party components which are part of your code. And uh, this is a vendor, this is a CVE which might have an issue. So now you would be thinking that how we are going to use it. So it's a very simple process wherein you download this project. Then what it does is, when you start running it on your code for the first time, it downloads the NVD database, checks what are the dependencies which are part of your code. And another important thing is that when it runs it, it checks out the product version and what kind of CVE which might be there for the code, and whether it's a high risk, whether it's a low risk, or what kind of risk it's posing. And it's important to figure out first itself that what are the third party libraries or components we are using. Another important aspect to remember is that we were speaking that if you don't know what your code has, how would you fix it? It's so tough to fix it, and then we are leaving the loopholes ourselves. So why not figuring that? Now another important aspect that comes into picture is that, are we going to pay for the project, or pay for the tool, or how would you do? So we can use dependency check and dependency track for like a baseline component as an assessment product or a project. And then when we know the appetite, then we realize, okay, this is what we have, then let's go ahead. We know our project very well, we know our technologies that we are using, then start using all these commercial products which can be more helpful. Like, I'm not against the commercial products at all. It's just that when we have a framework that we can pick it up, when we have a baseline project that is there, that can be picked up and can be leveraged, or can be used as a benchmark So why not use that? Why not take help from it? And it actually can check for, like, especially if I talk about dependency track, it can check for licenses, it can check for third party components, open source components, redundant OS, and whatnot. Then comes vulnerability testing. I am sure every one of you would be aware, okay, what is vulnerability testing, how it's done, especially all the old days that we've done it day in and day out. So we know about it. But how about using the open source components? There was someone on the call, I think Gerald was speaking about automating using Zap. So here, when we talk about web app pen testing, it is incomplete without web security testing guide, which is like one a showstopper for me. Like when I was introduced to web application security, uh, this was given to me. Like when I wanted to do in-depth security testing, it was like, you should go ahead and start reading this first, and then we can go ahead and start exploiting the vulnerability, start testing it. So web security testing guide is still one guide which I refer to, and it keeps getting updated every few years, and it's still relevant for developers, for security testers, for anyone who wants to get into cybersecurity or application security. And when we talk about web security testing guide, how can we miss the components around APIs? Because APIs are the next big thing which people have started understanding. People have started using all the microservices and whatnot. So API security components touches the potential sensitive APIs areas and concerns that can be there, and help in like creating a posture for yourself, or vulnerability posture for yourself or for the organization. Now, all the web applications we have seen, they have a mobile app for it. So why not do the mobile security testing? So mobile MSTG, or mobile security testing guide, is one detailed, comprehensive guide which talks about how you can do the mobile security testing, and how we can reverse engineer an app. If you go to the project, it lists down amazing aspects, amazing inputs, and they keep updating all of the things around mobile application security. Then comes automation. Now, when we are doing all of it and we don't do the automation, we tend to miss on a lot of things. People say that automation is something which might eat up the jobs, but I don't feel so. They are only going to help us in creating something uh, fast enough so that we can figure out the bugs early. At the same time, it gives us the energy, bandwidth to research more on the vulnerabilities and figuring out and understanding our environment better. So Zap is one beautiful project which is used in a lot of organization as an automation project, and that's been part of the functional testing or QA testing, where people have started integrating it with the QA testing tools, and there are so many exposed APIs which are there, and it seamlessly embeds to it. So people have started to love it, and then we can add our own cases to it. Like I have over 3000 test cases which are specifically designed for open source testing. Like I want to know about my application, and I don't want to pay for the commercial tool, so I just go ahead and start working on those attack vectors, customize those attack vectors, and load it to Zap, and then yes, fuzzing will start. Now, another great project is OWASP AMAS. This was something which I recently got to know like a couple of months back, but this is amazing network mapping tool which can do the asset discovery, and which can gather the information that around the open source components or open source things that might be there. Because if you don't understand your whole environment which is there on the internet, like which servers are there, what those servers are running on, it can be a big problem. So AMAS addresses all those concerns. Okay, now comes the point where we have done the requirements gathering greatly, we've done the threat modeling, we have done the uh, software code review, then software composition analysis, and even the vulnerability testing. But all of that we've done, but we did not do anything further on that. So it's as good as doing nothing. So defect tracking is equally important as testing. So if you're doing the or performing the testing and not tracking it, nobody is going to save you. So best is we start tracking it. So if we have found a bug and we have not tracked it to the closure, we will see all the vulnerabilities, all the hacks happening around us. So we need to track them. And especially if I talk about startups or the companies who are trying to understand that what are the defect tracking projects that they can use, tools they can use, what commercial project they should go for, or tool they should go for, this one we can be used as a baseline, like understand, okay, these are the things. mm, Starting with like the list of vulnerabilities. If there is a delta in the vulnerabilities, like if there's a duplicate, okay, it highlights it. And at the same time, if there are few findings which needs closer attention, or that needs to be addressed as early as possible, so it highlights that. So defect dojo is one great uh, product or project that I looked into. And what it does is that it integrates seamlessly with vulnerability management scanners also, and other pipeline projects, and fetches the data and highlights it. Especially if I talk about leadership, leadership always look for numbers and graphs and whatnot. And it's not just about them, but for us also. If we have a highlight, okay, these are the things that needs close attention, so we would be addressing, or we would be concentrating on them and fixing them. So defect dojo really really helps. Then comes defensive controls. This talks about that, when we are doing all the testing, why not have the defenses first? Like for CSRF, there is a CSRF guard. Then, when we talk about web application firewall, which people have started to talk a lot, especially during this pandemic, where they said, we need a WAF, we need a WAF, not just for external, for internal people. Or people have started to talk about zero trust concept. And then they concentrate around how we can have a good WAF, what are the rules that should be there. So more security core rule set has amazing rules that can be applied on the WAF. And when core rule set is alongside mode security itself is a WAF and the rules, so we can leverage it in any organization, and not just the mod security, but many other commercial WAFs are also leveraging core rule set to enhance the and fine tune the alerts, or the rules that they have. Now comes the project which is so much needed. I would say the most needed is proactive controls. Why can't we speak about, okay, what are the things are needed which are as early as possible? So proactive controls is just that. Like it addresses all of those issues, concerns that developer might face in the whole pipeline. So proactive controls can help in understanding all those bugs early. Then comes trainings and awareness. And this training is not just for security people, but for anyone and everyone. Like the people on the call, I heard that there are people who want to get into cybersecurity or application security, to be precise. So there should be something that they can take help from. It should not be like I started learning application security and I started bombarding any application. Absolutely, that's a cyber crime, and we can't go ahead with it. So there are certain projects like WebGoat, which I started off like it was something else when I started off. It used to come in CD. It was a huge project. But now it's like all software. You can download it, you can run it locally and do whatnot. So this is one amazing project in a form of like, as soon as you complete one challenge, it becomes green, and then you see that, okay, this is something how you exploit a bug, and then it suggests, okay, this is how it can be fixed also. Then there's another project which is Security Shepherd. It's also a vulnerable web application which you can try your hands on or get your hands dirty on. um, Now, when we talk about DevSlop project, it's more of a learning project. It spans around vulnerable APIs, vulnerable code or DevSecOps, and it it touches upon multiple cloud vendors, that how DevSecOps can be attained in the cloud, or how different projects might be running on DevSecOps, or all of that, like the practical exposure. Even if the things are not working, they're not working online also. So they speak about that and how this can be fixed. This project is something very beautiful. You should definitely take a look at, which is Juice Shop. So I've used it for a lot of CTFs, internal and external, and it brings out the best. Like especially with my developer friends and the people who uh, who are functional testers and who want to understand more around security. So Juice Shop is one amazing project, and we've used it extensively. There's so many challenges, and especially the kind of concept they come up with. They keep updating in new vulnerabilities every other day, and then you feel that yes, this is how you're trying to capture the flag. You're trying to figure out the bugs. So it's one amazing project. Then comes awareness, like how much awareness is important. Like if we talk about web testing guide, can we miss top 10? Like top 10 needs no introduction. Even PCI talks about top 10, like OWASP top 10. And I would say any company that I speak with says that we are compliant with top 10, we are doing this to get to where we are, or to have a good security posture around OWASP top 10. So this is something which should be made aware to not just security people, but to anyone and everyone. And these are not just top 10, but it's an extensive list of vulnerabilities. It has so many inside vulnerabilities. Like if we talk about injection, it's not just SQL injection, it's LDAP injection, it's a command injection and whatnot. So it goes in depth, and when you start reading about it, you'll say, okay, there's so much to offer. Then comes application security verification standard. Now, when I started working on web security testing guide, like testing guide, it's like a big book. I'm reading it, I'm understanding, and I was making my own checklist. Okay, these are the things that I want to test in an application. Once I was done with the whole list, I shared it with my seniors, with my colleagues, and they were like, you really worked on it. There's already an application security verification standard which is available, and that goes like there are different levels from cursory to advanced. Like if it's a financial organization, you can pick up the advanced option, and then you can start working on it, and you will see your own cases, test cases, that okay, these are the things that you should be testing against an application. And I was like, okay. Then uh, this project is so much active, so much helpful. Now, when we say OWASP top 10, can we forget about top 10 and mobile ASPS? No. So, mobile top 10 talks about the top 10 risks in as part of the mobile applications, and ASVS lists down that okay, these are the things that needs if you are a financial firm or a social media or any kind of firm, that what kind of maturity level you would be at, or what kind of test cases that should be run against the application. Similarly, the privacy risk. So, privacy risks are something which we tend to miss out at a lot of times. So, privacy risks in web applications and their countermeasures are equally important. And we've seen the privacy concerns raised by GDPR, CCPA, Brazilian Act, and India is also coming up with something similar. So, all of it is talking about it, but we tend to miss out on a lot of things. So privacy risk address all those things. uh, Another important aspect is automated threats, like especially for if I talk about e-commerce websites or financial firms or banking, they see a lot of automated threats. And what are those automated threats, what kind of threats that could be there, like bots and whatnot? How to address those concerns is very, very important. So automated threats to web application project actually concentrates more on that, and starts revealing all the right kind of checks that should be there. Then knowledge management is uh, I have mentioned all the projects which I've talked about. Now, why I've specifically highlighted these few projects like ASVS and Security Knowledge Framework and Stakes and Ladder. So, think about, you have ASVS wherein you have good information about the checklist. Now, SKF talks about, okay, these are the requirements that should be there. Now, how about when we merge them? So now SKF, or Security Knowledge Framework, has application security verification embedded, which has good checklist. You know your requirements, and then you know that these are the test cases you should be testing your application against. And then on top of it, you have some labs which developers and security people can go back and get to know, okay, this is how vulnerability can be exploited. This is how a vulnerability can be fixed. So they have mapped juice shop also into it, and there are hundreds of labs for different vulnerabilities, which can be around Docker, Kubernetes, or anything else. Then comes snakes and ladders. This is one interesting project because it gamifies the whole AppSec security controls, and this is more prevalent. I would say this game is an Asian game wherein I got to know about this game in London when I was going for when I was attending this conference in OWASP conference in London. So there I was like, okay, this is how it you can play the game and let people know, okay, these are the security controls. So every time you miss out on a security controls, you come down. And then you have to again work hard, mature your security requirements, and then go up. So you have to have like a good security knowledge to move up. Then cornucopia. This is one interesting project that has come out especially really well in this the whole lockdown period and the pandemic period where people were home, and then we wanted to get some games played around DevOps and Agile. So we started working on these cards, and every card has a hidden meaning for the DevOps technology and for Agile. Now, all the projects that I talked about, I've listed on this. So this is one amazing open source component, or I would say slide that I wanted to showcase around open source component. You can take a screenshot, or I have made this PPT available. Now, this whole thing is there, but there's one project that I've missed, which I always leave it for the last because that's one very, very important project, which is SAM project, which is security assessment maturity model. And this talks a lot about that where we stand, where we can go, where we can reach, or where we should reach, or how should we reach. So this is one amazing project. And then we've covered all security rat, SKF, threat dragon, all of them. So they are listed as part of defensive controls, defect tracking, secure code review, or composition analysis. Now, um, to sum up with, for all these projects are run by the leaders who are giving their free time or spending their valuable time. And so they also need people who can support them, help them in any which ways possible. So you can contribute via code contribution, because everything is on GitHub. You can just go to ovas.org projects. You'll see all the projects listed, and every project has a GitHub account, and you can help them in writing test cases, creating documentation, share it with people, and suggest the new features or anything. Like, I keep sharing my inputs around something that might be relevant for a project. Then how do we move forward? uh, you can go to ovasp.org and go for the projects, check out all those projects, or you can actually start looking for the nearest chapter. Like, we are meeting for New York chapter meet. There must be similar chapters around you. And if there's no chapter around you, what you can do is, you have bandwidth, you have energy, then you can actually request for a new chapter, and you can be a lead for that. So as a community, we have so much to offer, so much to give, and we can leverage all the opportunities which are there. Uh, I think there's one OWASP conference which is coming up next month, and there is one free training which is there. So you can sign up for that. And there are some paid trainings which are by wonderful leaders. You can take help from that. And then all the sessions that keep happening from different projects, from different chapters. You can reach me anytime on my Twitter handle or my LinkedIn. I am very much reachable. Feel free to share your inputs, feedback. I'll be more than happy to have a discussion. Thank you so much.